Have you ever thought that one day the very people who once held you in their arms, your parents could be willing to abandon their own 6-year-old grandchild simply because you refused to lend your brother $50,000? Have you ever thought that innocent little child would have to ask, Mom, what did I do wrong for Grandma and Grandpa not to love me anymore? And then you discover they use that child's name to take out a bank loan without telling you. This isn't just Laura's story, it's a question for you. When family hurts you, what will you do? Forgive, accept, or walk away to protect yourself? Laura had never imagined that one day the very woman who once sang her to sleep could be the one to break her heart. That day the weather was soft, the pale sunlight spilling gently across the oak kitchen table. The steady ticking of the wall clock filled the warm, cozy space, while Ethan, her 6-year-old with a mop of messy brown hair, sat drawing with his colored markers. A dinosaur larger than life sprawled across the page. Laura smiled as she scooped steaming soup into his bowl. "What are you drawing, Ethan?" "I'm drawing our house." "That's you, that's me, and that's the dinosaur guarding the house." Ethan beamed, grinning wide, his little teeth uneven from the gaps. Laura laughed softly, set the bowl in front of him, and bent down to kiss the top of his fluffy hair. But then the phone rang loud sharp, pulling her out of the moment. The screen flashed Mom. She pressed answer, her voice as calm as she could manage. "Hi, Mom. Is everything okay?" Her mother's voice came through sharper than usual, cool and cutting. "Laura, I'm calling about Kyle. Your brother needs to borrow $50,000 to open a coffee shop. Can you help?" The question floated out so casually, as if $50,000 were a small favor. As if Laura wasn't a single mother scraping by to pay for Ethan's tuition, the rent, the insurance. Her fingers tightened slightly around the spoon. She took a deep breath. "Mom, I can't," Laura said, her voice barely audible, almost a whisper. "I have to take care of Ethan. Tuition, the mortgage, insurance. And Kyle. He's never been the stable one, you know that." A heavy silence filled the space, stretching taut between them. Then her mother spoke, her voice cold as wind sweeping across a barren field. "You're selfish, Laura. Family is supposed to help each other. I'm disappointed in you." Laura closed her eyes, her chest tightening painfully. "Mom, I don't want it to be like this, but—" "No buts." Her mother snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "If you can't help, then don't bother calling home anymore. Don't come to Sunday dinner. And tell Ethan his grandparents won't be seeing him either. Don't blame me." The call ended abrupt, final, leaving only the hollow, empty beeping in Laura's ear. She set the phone down on the table, her stomach twisting. Ethan looked up at her, his wide, innocent eyes bright as an autumn sky. "Mom, who was that?" Laura swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Just Grandma's sweetheart." Ethan tilted his head, curiosity sparkling in his gaze. "What did Grandma say?" Mom. Laura looked at her son, at those eyes so much like his father's, the man who once promised forever, only to drift away like a passing breeze. Her voice broke, almost cracking, as she replied, "She was just checking in, honey." Ethan smiled softly, turning back to his drawing, blissfully unaware that his mother's heart was splintering. Laura watched him, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. When love becomes something you barter for, what does family even mean anymore? Had she done the right thing by saying no, or was she the one who had just shattered the home she'd tried so hard to hold together? Laura discovered she had been removed from the family group chat on a Monday morning. The work emails kept flooding and the notifications from Ethan's school popped up like usual, but the familiar green dot on the family dinner group, the place where her mom shared pictures of food, where relatives swapped little stories, was gone. Laura blinked, refreshed, the app searched. Nothing. She tried typing the group's name once, twice again. But no, the group was still there. She just wasn't part of it anymore. Her hand trembled as she dialed her mother. The line clicked, and her mother's voice came through, dry, distant, cold as ice. "Laura, I told you already. If you're not going to help Kyle, there's nothing left for us to talk about." "But Mom, I'm your daughter." Laura's voice broke, soft, almost pleading. "I don't need a cold-hearted daughter like you." Then the call ended. That sharp, hollow beep, beep, reverberated in Laura's ear, pulsing in time with the thudding of her heart. She sank into the kitchen chair, the afternoon breeze drifting through the window, carrying the scent of cold food and the faint laughter of neighbors outside. Everything around her was just as it had been, but to Laura, it felt like the world was caving in. That evening, Laura tried to hold it together. She tidied up the kitchen, read a story with Ethan, tried to act as if nothing had changed. But she could feel it, Ethan watching her, his gaze flickering toward her in a way that felt different. When Laura closed the book gently, running her fingers through his hair, Ethan looked up at her, his voice small, almost a whisper. "Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa not love me anymore?" Laura froze. That innocent question, it cut like a knife, sharp and deep. She couldn't answer right away. She looked into his wide, round eyes, so bright, so pure, and her throat tightened painfully. "No, sweetheart. They still love you." Laura forced a smile, but even she didn't believe her own words. That night the rain came in soft, steady drizzles. Laura woke in the middle of the night to a faint rustling sound. She tiptoed out of her room and found Ethan at his little desk, his hair tousled from sleep, holding a pair of scissors-colored paper and a marker. Laura stood quietly watching. He was folding a paper crane carefully, though the wings were slightly crooked, the folds uneven, the charming, clumsy work of a child. On the wing in wobbly handwriting, it read, "I love you, Grandma. I'm sorry Mommy made you sad." Laura's hands trembled. She stepped closer gently, placing her hand on his shoulder. Ethan looked up, his eyes sparkling in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Mom, if I send this to Grandma, will she be happy again?" Laura didn't answer. She knelt down and hugged him tight, her chest aching as if it might crack open. Ethan nestled into her shoulder, his hair carrying that soft, sweet scent of children's shampoo, the smell of innocence, of childhood, of something she had to protect at all costs. Laura couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, the faint glow of the lamp casting shadows on the ceiling, her heart pounding. In her mind, she could hear the story her parents were probably telling the rest of the family. "Laura is so selfish. She wouldn't help Kyle, and she spoke to us so disrespectfully. Poor Kyle, he just wanted to start a business. And his sister? How could she be so cruel?" Laura knew how these stories worked. They traveled from one mouth to another, each person adding their own twist, until the version that spread became the only truth that mattered. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over her mother's chat. She started typing, "Mom, I'm sorry." But then she stopped. She looked at Ethan, fast asleep, clutching the paper crane in his little hands. Why should she apologize? What had she done wrong? Laura put the phone down, turned off the screen. A single tear slipped down her cheek, salty and sharp. And in that quiet, aching moment, a question whispered in her mind. When family turns their back on you because you didn't do what they wanted, do you bow your head and accept it? Or do you stand up for yourself and protect your innocent child? Laura didn't have the answer. But she knew one thing. She couldn't let Ethan grow up in a family where love was measured by the size of a loan. In the days that followed, the air inside Laura's small home felt thick, heavy, so dense that even breathing seemed like a conscious effort. Ethan, once so full of stories about school and playground adventures, had gone quiet. His freckled face hovered low over his drawing paper lips, pressed together in silence. Laura noticed how he often stared out the window, his eyes distant, far away from the room they sat in. Sometimes he bit the end of his pencil, a new habit she hadn't seen before. On Tuesday evening, Laura was folding laundry when she noticed Ethan seated at his desk, focused intently on a drawing with his wax crayons. She walked over to praise him, but her heart clenched as she took in the image. It was a family drawing, simple, childlike Mom, Ethan, and a wide, empty space to the right. No grandparents, no Kyle, no one else. Laura swallowed hard. Her voice came out as a soft murmur. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Ethan looked up, his green eyes a mix of confusion and innocence. "I'm drawing our family, Mom. But Grandma and Grandpa don't love me anymore, do they?" Laura froze. A chill traced down her spine as she sat down beside him, placing a gentle hand on his small shoulder. Her voice trembled. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault." Ethan pressed his lips together, his head dipping lower. His voice was barely audible. Then why is Grandma mad at you? And at me too? That question, it sliced right through her. Quiet, sharp, unrelenting. That night, Laura tossed and turned in bed. The nightlight had been turned off long ago, but the darkness brought no comfort. Her mind was a whirlpool of chaos. The ticking wall clock marked each second of silence like an echo of her own loneliness. She turned over, staring at the glow of the streetlight outside the window, wondering, had she been too harsh? Had she been selfish? Choosing the safety of herself and her son over the bonds of family. Her mother's words rang again in her memory, crisp, final. If you won't help Kyle, then don't call anymore. That voice was a slammed door, cold, unforgiving. Laura reached for her phone, opened the message thread. The word mom stared back at her from the screen. She wanted to text, to explain, to say she was still Laura, still her mother's daughter, still someone who needed a place to rest her head and her heart, but her fingers hovered unmoving. She thought of Ethan, the drawing missing its grandparents, the weight in his eyes that no child should carry. Laura rested her head in her hands, a helplessness so deep it felt like drowning wrapped itself around her chest. The next day, while tidying up Ethan's room, Laura found a tiny slip of paper sitting neatly on his bookshelf. A paper crane carefully folded, though its wings were lopsided, the folds a little off, the kind of innocent clumsiness that usually makes adults smile. But today Laura couldn't smile. Scrawled across one wing in that wobbly, uneven handwriting of a 6-year-old, "I'm sorry I made Grandma sad." "I love you, Grandma." Laura sank down, clutching the crane in her hands like it held her own broken heart. She cried, quietly. Her tears spilled down her cheeks, falling onto the fragile wings of that paper crane. Ethan thought he had done something wrong. He blamed himself. He was trying to fix something that was never his to carry. Laura felt like a villain in her own family story. The selfish mother, the ungrateful daughter, the one who shattered the illusion of unity simply because she wouldn't lend her brother the money. She sat for a long time in the dim living room, the golden wash of streetlight painting soft streaks across the wall. And she asked herself, should I give in? Should I call my mother? Say I'll figure something out? Give Kyle the money, if only to bring back some peace for Ethan. But then she pictured Ethan again holding that paper crane in his small, hopeful hands. And she knew, if she gave in now, there would be a next time, and a next. Kyle would need help again. Her mother would ask for another sacrifice. And Ethan, her sweet boy, would grow up in a world where love came with a price tag, where silence was seen as duty, and blind obedience was mistaken for virtue. Laura wiped her tears, the ache in her chest beginning to settle into something quieter. Not peace, but clarity. She knew now she could not save a family that only knew how to count love in dollars. Laura got the call from the bank on a gray overcast Thursday afternoon. The woman's voice on the other end was polite but sharp in that practiced, precise way of people who deal with money for a living. "Hello, this is Diane from the Credit Approval Department at First State Bank. We're processing the loan application for the Brew and Bloom Cafe project. However, we need to verify a few details, especially the information of the co-signer Ethan Williams, born March 14th, 6 years old." Laura froze. Ethan. Ethan. Who? Her voice caught in her throat. "Ethan Williams. The address matches your home address. Your son, isn't he?" Laura's heart pounded so loudly in her ears it drowned out everything else. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from collapsing. "Wait, can you send me the application?" she managed to whisper. "Of course." According to the documents, the primary applicant is Kyle Williams, and the co-signer is Ethan Williams, information sourced from his birth certificate. Laura's fingers clenched the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. Kyle, Mom, Ethan. They had used her son's name, her 6-year-old son's name, to secure a bank loan. A wave of nausea surged up her throat. Her voice trembled as she stammered, "Wait, he's just a child? 6 years old? How could you—" "Except," Diane hesitated, her tone suddenly more cautious. "Well, this is a family co-sign application. The information was verified by The legal guardian, your mother, Mrs. Margaret Williams. Laura sank to the kitchen floor, her hands shaking as she opened the email from the bank. And there it was, Ethan's name printed clearly on the official forms. The childish scrawl of the signature, a clumsy, uneven mess Kyle must have forged in her son's name because Ethan couldn't even write his full name properly yet. She couldn't remember how she made it to her parents' house. Just the blur of windshield wipers beating against the glass, the muffled drone of the radio blending into the erratic thumping of her heart, and the harsh flash of red taillights like a warning of a storm barreling toward her. Ethan sat quietly in the back seat, clutching his paper crane tightly in his hands, watching his mother drive in tense, breathless silence. When they pulled up to the familiar blue-gray house faded, weathered by time, Laura gripped Ethan's hand, climbed the old wooden steps one by one. The same steps where she once sat with a popsicle in the summer heat. The same porch where she once felt safe. Inside, it was as if she'd never existed. Kyle lounged comfortably on the sofa, feet up on the coffee table, sipping a beer. Her father stared blankly at the TV, the noise of a sports announcer drowning out the sound of Laura's pounding heart. Her mother stood in the kitchen, slicing an apple pie, her hands pausing midair as Laura walked in. They all froze when she dropped the stack of bank papers onto the coffee table, the pages scattering like leaves in a sudden wind. "What's this?" Kyle asked, eyebrows raised, voice as casual as if they were discussing the weather. Laura's eyes locked onto her mother's. Her voice came out low and tight, each word landing heavy as stone. "I want to know why you and Kyle used Ethan's name, a 6-year-old child's name, to get a loan." The room fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock filled the space like a slow, steady drumbeat against Laura's frayed nerves. Her mother faltered, her voice small, barely a breath. "Laura, I just wanted to help Kyle. You wouldn't help, so I had to find another way. It's just a name, honey. What harm is there?" Laura felt her blood turn cold. Just a name? Just the name of her son used as collateral for a loan. Before Laura could speak, Ethan tugged gently at her sleeve. He looked up, his voice soft but clear, the words breaking through the room like a crack of thunder. "You said you love me? But why did you use my name to borrow money? I'm not a tool for people to do bad things." The room went still, so quiet it was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Kyle blinked, gave a small, dismissive smirk, then looked away, taking a sip of his beer. Her father turned his head, pretending to be absorbed in the game, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Her mother, the woman who once comforted Laura when she cried after being teased at school, suddenly looked small, fragile, a stranger in her own home. Laura knelt down in front of Ethan, cupping his small shoulders in her hands. Her voice shook, but it was steady. "You were right to say that, Ethan. You didn't do anything wrong. Never let anyone use your name, your worth, for their own mistakes." She turned to her mother, the woman who once taught her how to fold paper cranes when she was 7, but now she felt like a stranger too. "Mom, if your love is something I have to buy with $50,000, if it costs my son's innocence, his name, his dignity, then no thank you. I'll take Ethan. You can keep Kyle and the debt." Laura rose, took Ethan's hand, and turned to leave. The soft patter of rain began tapping against the porch roof. Ethan clutched his paper crane tight, his eyes glistening as he looked up at her. "Mom, we're still a family, right?" Laura smiled faintly, her tears slipping down her cheeks, her voice a quiet but steady promise. "Yes, baby. We're a family, just you and me. That's all we need." And in the stillness that followed, a question echoed, quiet but sharp as a blade. When it's your own child who has to speak up to protect themselves from their own family, what will you do? Laura severed all ties with her parents and Kyle on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. No shouting, no tears streaming down her face, just a short email written in the quiet of her kitchen, but heavy enough to press on her chest like a stone. It read, "Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't let Ethan grow up in a world where love is measured by the balance in a bank account. I have to teach my son that a person's worth isn't in a savings account or a signature on a loan contract. It's in how they love and respect others. I won't be part of this cycle anymore." Please consider me erased from the family's story, if that makes things easier for you. Wishing you well. Goodbye. Laura pressed send, shut her laptop, and stood still in the kitchen, where the faint scent of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies still lingered in the air. Ethan padded into the room holding a tiny toy car, his hair a little tousled from lying on the grass outside. He looked up at her, his green eyes shining in the soft afternoon light, and asked in that small, earnest voice of his, so simple yet impossibly sincere, Mom. "We're still okay, right?" Laura smiled gently, barely a curve of her lips, but it carried a quiet, unshakable strength. She knelt down, wrapping her arms tightly around her son, feeling the steady rhythm of his small, brave heart pressed against hers. "Yes, baby. As long as I have you, I'm always okay." Ethan's face lit up in a wide, toothy grin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. And in that moment, Laura knew her son didn't need to understand the tangled storms of adult conflict, the quiet betrayals folded between family dinners, the invisible bartering that sometimes poisoned what should have been unconditional love. He just needed a warm embrace, a safe home, a mother strong enough to say no when no was the only answer that would protect him. That afternoon, Laura stood by the window, watching Ethan run across the grass in the backyard. The late sun cast a golden glow over his messy hair, and his laughter, light unburdened, rose into the air as if the weight of the world had been kept safely outside the walls of their little home. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the warmth of the moment, and reminded herself, family isn't where you're born. It's where you are loved and respected. She knew there would still be long nights. There would be quiet, aching pauses that crept in when the world outside fell silent. There would be times when loneliness would sit with her like an uninvited guest. But as she watched Ethan dart across the lawn, chasing a paper kite through the clear blue sky, Laura knew she had made the right choice. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to stay and fight. It's to walk away, to leave behind relationships that wear the name family, but have long since stopped being a place of love, a place of belonging, a place of safety. And in the quiet that followed, one final question lingered, soft but heavy, a whisper in the hearts of those listening. When family hurts, will you forgive, accept, or walk away to protect yourself and the people you love? If you've ever found yourself in situations like this, or even if you just want to hear the full story, to the end, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We search for answers to the questions no one else dares to ask.